Hello, my name is Angel Rhodes, and this is my Interpersonal Communications project for Human Services 508 at Liberty University. Next slide. The basis for this course has been the development of strong interpersonal communication skills. Throughout this presentation, I will share some of the key concepts that I have learned. Let's begin with the fundamentals. What is communication? As defined by Stewart, communication and communicating are terms used to describe the continuous, complex, collaborative process of verbal and nonverbal meaning making. Our ability to successfully make meanings with those around us determine our interpersonal communication skill levels. According to Stewart, interpersonal communication takes place when the parties involved emphasize each other's uniqueness, unmeasurability, responsiveness, reflectiveness, and addressability. This is known as maximizing the presence of the personal. Stewart also used the metaphor of inhaling and exhaling to describe the communication process in a truly profound way. He used the concept of inhaling to refer to our role of active listeners in the communication process, and exhaling to refer to how we express or disclose ourselves in conversation. Next slide. Learning to effectively inhale and exhale is imperative to building quality interpersonal communications and to achieving my overarching goals. My overarching goals are to find a place of balance between the three participants in my drama triangle. Oftentimes, when people come to me for help, the rescuer in me will begin to take on their problems and formulate solutions for them. As a result, these people become dependent upon me to give them the answer or to simply handle things for them. Eventually, I become frustrated because I feel as though I'm being taken advantage of. So finding this place of balance will enable me to more effectively help those that come to me for assistance. My other overarching goal is to become a true level 1 listener by following God's example of gracious and effective listening. When we pray, our Father listens patiently and allows us to share all that's on our hearts and minds. Only when we are completely done and in a place where we are capable of receiving does He whisper words of correction or comfort to us. Following this listening style will allow others to unburden themselves and then calm down enough to where they're able to receive the help or guidance that I'm trying to provide. Next slide. Stewart states that there is a direct link between the quality of our communication and the quality of our life. This means that the more effectively we communicate with others, the better our relationships will be. This premise is known as enlarging the conversation. My own personal definition of enlarging the conversation is that I must first evaluate my personal communication skills. Next, I must build upon my communication strengths while identifying those areas that I still need to improve upon. I must then locate the resources necessary to improve those skills. My first step in this process was taking the personality and communications assessments. Next slide. The results of my Uniquely You profile showed that both my Graph 1, this is expected of me, and Graph 2, this is me, personality blends were DSC. As a DSC personality, I am passive. However, I do have some surprisingly dominant ways. My sensitive, compliant, and conscientious temperament tend to balance out my abrasive and forceful side. I am not very talkative, nor do I desire to be the center of attention, but I have no problem speaking before crowds if necessary. I am cautious and contemplative and tend to research more than most when I'm making informed decisions. I'm withdrawn and reserved in public settings, but my humble spirit and quiet, easygoing demeanor cause people to seek me for counsel because I'm a great listener. Next slide. On my Discovery Health Communications Assessment, I scored 84 out of 100%. According to these results, I'm an excellent communicator. I'm extremely adept at conveying my thoughts, and I'm also a very empathetic listener. I do my best to place myself in other people's shoes to better understand them. I generally have a good sense of what others are thinking and will adjust myself accordingly if the people I'm conversing with seem confused or perhaps uncomfortable. However, I do tend to shy away from difficult or uncomfortable conversations. Since I did not score 100%, there is still room for improvement. Next slide. I now realize that the way that I listen has a great deal to do with my childhood experiences. In my home, I was the youngest of 6 children, and I was often made to feel as though what I had to say was not important. I was never encouraged to share my thoughts or feelings, and I was often told to shut up as a child. As a result of these negative strokes, I now tend to block out those things that I deem as unimportant. Next slide. According to Burley Allen, listening barriers exist when the listener hears what he or she wants to hear, not what really is being communicated. One barrier that affects my personal communication is my biased listening. This occurs when I form an opinion of what someone will say as a result of a negative past experience. Another barrier to my communications is the fact that during these instances of biased listening, I'm also guilty of being a fake listener because I pretend to listen to the speaker when in fact I've already determined that what they have to say is of no value to me and I've tuned them out. My meta messages can also act as barriers to my communication. Therefore, I must be cognizant of the unspoken messages that I send out through my body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice. Next slide. Noise is anything that distracts us from being able to fully engage in conversation and listening. These distractions can be internal or external and are referred to as pollution. The internal noise pollution that tend to distract me are negative past experiences that I've allowed to filter into my present situations. Another source of my internal pollution is the time lag factor. Burley Allen explains that the average talker speaks approximately 200 words per minute. However, the average listener can process information at a rate of 300 to 500 words per minute. It's during these time lags that I find myself daydreaming or going off onto mental tangents. Next slide. External noise pollution from the environment that tend to distract me are things such as the way the speaker looks, talks, or behaves, loud noises, room temperature, and interruptions. Next slide. Level 1 or empathetic listening and active listening will help me to eliminate the internal and external noises that I'm prone to. According to Burley Allen, Level 1 listening involves being aware and present in the moment, acknowledging and responding to the speaker, and being empathetic to the speaker's thoughts and feelings. Next slide. Active listening includes a variety of behaviors that communicate to others that they are heard and understood, that the feelings that underlie their words are appreciated and accepted, and that regardless of what the individual might say, think, or feel, they are accepted as a person. Active listening involves avoiding crossover, which is interference from other conversations or sounds around me, providing door openers, which are nonverbal cues such as eye contact and nodding to encourage the speaker to continue, and finally, paraphrasing to ensure that I've heard accurately. Next slide. I've recently been reminded that a goal without a plan is simply a wish, and the Bible declares that faith without works is dead. It is with these two things in mind that I've devised a plan to achieve my overarching goal. In order to balance the role between the 3 participants of my drama triangle, my plan is to remain mindful that my role as a listener is not to rush in and solve the talker's problem, but to listen attentively, allowing the talker to come to their own solutions. This will prevent people from becoming dependent upon me, when in fact it is my desire to be able to share my relationship with Christ with them, so that they will in turn become dependent upon Him. I will become a level 1 listener by balancing my communications through actively listening until it's my turn to talk, recognizing when the other person is no longer hearing me, and then listening until the person is calm enough to hear me again. I can accomplish both of these goals by following God's example of being a gracious and effective leader. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.